Hey guys, and welcome back to my true crime channel. I hope you guys are having a great day today and are excited to hear about another new case. This is only the second case that I've done so far, and it actually is about another serial killer. I was tossing around the idea of doing groups of videos all about different genres of true crime. I don't know if I want to do cases just randomly or if I want to have them based around certain themes. Since both of these are based around serial killers, the first two, I think my first theme is just going to be all about serial killers, and that's going to be what I base the first few videos on my true crime channel about, and then maybe after that I'll do different genres. I'm not positive I'm going to do that yet, but it's just something that I've been tossing around and thinking about, so let me know if that's something that you'd be interested in. If not, I can still just upload random cases, but it doesn't really matter. Whatever you guys want to hear about. Today's case is a little bit more recent than the one that we did about Belginis, but it's actually not a current day case quite yet. And this takes place in the 80s and 90s. So it's a little bit more recent, but still about 30 to 20 years ago. I feel like doing older cases sometimes is a little bit more interesting just because although I think current day true crime is very interesting, it can sometimes hit a little bit too close to home when things are happening right now and cases haven't been solved. It can be a little scary. So I think that looking at past cases is really interesting, and they don't usually get as much coverage as current day cases do by true crime YouTubers that I've noticed. So I wanted to kind of shed light on past cases that have happened as well. Maybe ones that you haven't heard of so that you don't have to watch the same videos about the same cases that everybody else has done. So let's jump right into the video. Today's case is about Ahmad Suradji. This case is very interesting, to say the least. This one actually has to do a little bit with sorcery and magic, which is very different in true crime because obviously true crime is all about things that are true and crimes that genuinely happen. And although this crime did genuinely happen, the way it happened and the reason for which it happens is very interesting. Let's just jump right in. Ahmad Suradji was born January 10th, 1949 in Medan, Indonesia. Now, his father was always known as a sorcerer where he grew up and was able to do things that were magic that other people could not do. Now, growing up, Ahmad was typically neglected by his parents. He talked later about how they didn't acknowledge his existence half the time. He basically took care of himself from a very young age. His dad was busy doing his thing, his mom was busy doing her thing, and he often was considered different by other kids his age and was often picked on and bullied, and he didn't really have any friends whatsoever. So most of the time he just spent all by himself. He said that a majority of his childhood he remembers being completely alone. Now, at only 19 years old, he ended up actually serving some time in prison for petty crimes mostly, along with public violence. And he ended up serving 10 years in total for these crimes, which would put him at 29 when he got out. Now, after Ahmad got out of prison, he said that that was behind him. He said he was a changed person, he never wanted to commit another crime again, that he was on a righteous path now, and that he was ready to be the purest person that he could possibly be and commit no more crimes. He started to become really preoccupied and fascinated by things like magic and sorcery, which he said he got mostly from his father, and growing up seeing his father taking an interest and pursuing those things as well. So soon after his stint in prison, he ended up moving to a village called Aman Damai. This is an Indonesian province of North Sumatra, and Ahmad set himself up as a local duken. So a little context is needed to understand what a duken is in Indonesia. So in Indonesia, especially in very rural areas, for many years, a long time, there has been a great fascination with the supernatural, sorcery, magic, things that can't quite be explained by science. So a duken is the Indonesian term for a shaman, and these people are thought to have special powers, being able to heal people, being able to have spiritual connections to people, and they basically can do things that a normal human cannot do. So Ahmad ended up setting himself up as one of these dukens in the area that he lived in. And this gave him the opportunity to have a ton of people visit his house and ask him for whatever their heart desired. If they wanted to find love, they would go to him. If they wanted to figure out how to make a decision, they went to him. If they wanted their loved one to be healed, they would go to him. Anything that they needed, they would go to him for in this small area. So in this community, he started to become heavily respected. All of the local people truly believed that he had these powers and truly believed that he could do things that none of them could do and that he had special powers. This almost invincibility that Ahmad had gave him a pass to be able to do things that nobody else could do, because they believed that anything he said was 100% true, and anybody that questioned him was immediately thought of as ridiculous. Why wouldn't you believe in him? He could do amazing things. Now, in 1986, Ahmad actually had a dream about his father, who was deceased at this time, but his father appeared in one of his dreams and told him, "You need the saliva of 70 dead young women in order to attain invincibility." And when Ahmad awoke from this dream, he took it as his father sending him a message past death. He took it as, this is my father trying to tell me that I can be invincible if I just attain the saliva of 70 dead women. Now, in the dream, the father was not clear about how he would attain this saliva of these dead women. Ahmad himself at first thought that he could just go to grave sites and maybe dig up recently deceased people or take their saliva, or wait until people died and he could just be the first one there and take their saliva. It's pretty gross. However, he began to think that this would be impractical, and he began to think of how much time he would be wasting going to all these grave sites, going to all these people that have died and taking their saliva, and he thought, I can do this so much quicker if I have the dead women right there in front of me, if I create the dead women in a way. So, 11 years after this dream, Ahmad was able to kill 42 women in order to attain their saliva, and he went undisturbed without anyone even noticing that he was doing anything. Since he was a respected dukin in the area, women would actually often just go to his house voluntarily. He didn't have to lure anyone. He didn't have to sneak around in the night and try and get people or try to seduce women. Women would just come to his house in hopes of getting any of the things that I listed previously. You know, love, fortune. If they're having marital problems, they would go to him. And they just had no idea that he was not at all what he seemed. This is also how Ahmad was able to make so much money that he did. He would just have these women come over to his house and he would basically rob them, but without actually robbing them, because they would give him this money thinking that he was going to solve whatever problem that he said that he would solve of theirs. However, he never necessarily had the intention to do that. He only needed their money and their saliva. Typically for each woman, he would make around $200 to $400 depending on the service that he was doing. Now, during the daytime, since he typically did his sorcery at nighttime and the women would typically come to him more towards the evening or nights, during the day he would be a cattle breeder, and he would have all of this wide open land, which actually provided him the perfect opportunity to bury his bodies without raising any suspicion whatsoever. Now, when he decided that he was going to kill a woman that came to his house in search of something, in search of his sorcery, he would have them dig a hole in this wide open space that was basically the size of them. He asked them to basically dig their own graves, not telling them that it was their own graves. He explained that this was all part of the ritual, this was part of his powers, this was something that was going to help them, but instead he was getting free labor out of them in order to have their graves already dug. So this is pretty disturbing, but after these graves had been dug, he asked them to stand inside of said grave, and he would bury them about waist deep with dirt. This immobilized the women, so they were not able to move once they were buried waist deep with dirt, so there was nothing they could really do. They couldn't run or anything like that. And that is when he would typically strangle them with a cable. This is also pretty sick, but he would oftentimes, after they were dead, point them at his house so that he could feel like he had even more power over them. After he had done all this, he would suck the saliva from their mouths. So this was the pattern and sort of the routine of killing that he would start implementing to all of the women that came to visit him. And he believed if it wasn't done in this exact way that I just described, that he wouldn't get the same amount of spiritual power. He thought that if he did it in the same pattern, same routine, and followed the same formula, if you will, every single time, that he would get the most spiritual power. Now, there was periods of time where he was getting no customers, because not everybody always has problems that they need to go to a sorcerer for. When there would be times that he wouldn't get any customers for a little while, he would actually just go out, find prostitutes, lure them back to his house in promises of, giving them money, but he would just kill them when they got to his house, because he was worried that if there was too much time in between each of the killings, that he wouldn't have enough saliva, and that he was worried that something would happen before he could get all of the saliva that he needed to collect in order to have invincibility. Now, during his entire killing spree that lasted 11 years, he did get married, and he actually had 3 wives, which happens to be 3 sisters, and their names were Tumini, Tumina, and Gatia. Now, on April 27th, 1997, 11 years after Ahmad had started killing all these innocent women, a farmer who worked near him just happens to stumble across this wide open space in this field. And he saw what looked like a strange mound of dirt in the sugarcane fields that was just very disturbed and didn't look normal. He went to his village head and alerted him of what he saw in this field. And this village head actually happened to be Ahmad's neighbor and was always kind of suspicious of weird things going on. So he decided to grab the farmer and 5 other men, and they were all gonna dig up whatever was in this hole. Once they started digging just a couple feet down, they were suddenly hit with a terrible smell, just a rancid, terrible smell. And as they dug deeper, they then saw the body of a naked young woman. Now, this is really sad, but they didn't know how to identify her body. I mean, this was 1997. They didn't really have as much DNA testing as we have now. So they had to ask people if anybody had any missing relatives recently, one that would match the description of this young girl. And they had to eventually search through all these people that said that they had missing people until they found the mother of this young girl, who had to come and identify her daughter and say, "That's my daughter," which is pretty devastating, honestly. So her mother identified her as 21-year-old Shri Kamala Dewey. So, a little background on Shri and what happens to her leading up to her death. 3 days before her body would end up being found by these farmers, she had left her family home saying that she was just going to go run a quick errand. But a little while after this, a rickshaw driver named Andreas Suito actually came forward and said that he was the one that dropped Shri off at Ahmad's house. He explained that she said that she wanted to go there and that he was curious because it was late at night and he wanted to make sure that she was okay. And he tried to ask her if everything was okay and why she was going so late at night, but she just responded to him and told him not to be nosy and not to worry about it and just take her there. So the night of the murder, after Shri arrived at Ahmad's house and asked him, to help her with whatever she needed help with, he attempted to get her to go to a graveyard in order to perform whatever ritual he said he was going to perform on her. However, Shri was hesitant and very scared. I mean, this guy's just trying to lure her out to a graveyard. Of course she's going to be scared. So she said that she basically refused to go with him alone, and she would only go out to this graveyard with him if one of his wives came with them. So Ahmad agreed and brought Tumini with them, and this is actually how Tumini ended up finding out about the murders and all of these girls that he had killed. It's pretty messed up that Tumini saw all this and didn't say anything about it and just accepted that her husband was a serial killer who had been draining saliva out of girls. I don't think me personally would accept that from anybody that I knew, but... So investigators go to Ahmad's home right away in order to find out if he did have anything to do with his murder. And they ended up finding Shri's bracelet, her purse, and the dress that she was wearing the day that she went to go run the errand that she said she was running. So they questioned Ahmad about all of this, and he wrote it off as just saying that she had come to him for guidance because she was worried that her fiancé was going to leave her for another woman. And they immediately took him in and started questioning him about everything, and he ended up confessing to the murder of Shri. So he ended up getting arrested for the murder of Shri on April 30th, 1997, and they ended up questioning him for about 4 days, interrogating him about if he had killed anybody else, if this was a common thing, what's up. He ended up confessing to the murder of 42 women and girls. And he said that every single one of their bodies were buried in the sugarcane field that they had found Shri's body in. After hearing this confession, a massive excavation was conducted all over these sugarcane fields in order to hopefully find the bodies. And this excavation found tons of skulls, bones, bodies, you know, just all sorts of remains. The investigators went on to question all 3 of his wives as well to see if they were in on it, if they helped in any way, and if they needed to be charged as well. And Tumini, his first wife, who did have knowledge of his murders but didn't say anything, did end up getting charged as his accomplice, and she was charged with life in prison. As for Ahmad, once they had found all the evidence they needed and his story was backed up by the fact that all of these girls' remains were in this field, he was convicted and sentenced to death. So he served 11 years on death row in prison, and July 10th, 2008 was executed by a firing squad. Now, his final wish before being executed was that he could just speak to his wife Tumini, who was also in jail at that time for her part in it, and the jailers did allow him to speak to her one last time. It's unclear what they spoke about. Now, his final words before facing the firing squad, some feel like do show slight remorse for what he did. He said, "The black magic came from God. I don't have it anymore. I have repented. I hope I have a chance to live." That's great that you've repented and everything, but you can't just kill 42 women and then turn around and say, well, that's all behind me. That's not me anymore. That's just ridiculous. And the fact that he said, I hope I have a chance to live, when he didn't give any of those 42 women or girls the chance to live, is absolutely asinine. Who do you think you are that you get to play God, basically, and take away these lives of these girls and women, but then you don't think that you deserve to die for all of that? Now, your thoughts on death penalty aside, whether you think it's justified or not justified, I personally am not all for the death penalty, but I do understand, especially in cases like this, the kind of peace that would be brought to the families knowing that this monster is no longer on the earth. I can't imagine having a child and having somebody take away my child's life for nothing more than their saliva. And it's just so sad that it had to happen, because it didn't have to happen. It was completely avoidable. Those 42 women and girls could have gone on to do amazing things. They could have, and even if they didn't, they still meant something to their families and to their friends, and they still deserved to have a life that wasn't taken by somebody who thought that they deserved better. This whole case really bothers me. I don't like entitlement in people, and I don't like, especially when serial killers think that they're entitled to certain things and certain rights. I personally don't think that they deserve anything good in their entire lives to happen if they're willing to take away a life of another. Anyways, got a little heated those last couple minutes, so I'm sorry about that, but I hope you enjoyed hearing about this case. I know that it probably frustrated some of you too, because it was quite literally completely unnecessary. I still hope that you enjoyed hearing about it and hearing me talk about it. If you did, please consider giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing to my channel. If you want to see more true crime content like this, I'll see you guys in my next true crime video. Bye!